Good morning, everybody. I call the meeting to order. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis people. Our panel today, to my left is Mr. Jeff Pesch. To my far left is Mr. Mark Boretsky. I'm Robert Buss. The assessor is Merrick Froelich, and the recording secretary today is Michelle Lépine. We will be hearing applications for revision of the following of the assessments roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessors make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing-in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be a part of the public record. Parties.
Good morning.
Can you state the full name, please?
Very well.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
State your full name, please.
Bradford Scott Borgstrom.
And do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Morning, Mr. Borgstrom.
Good morning.
Mr. Froelich.
Yep.
I see there's 8 properties on the docket today.
We might have some happy news for you.
Well, we'll start with item number 1, 1260 Clarence Avenue.
Okay. File number is 193753. Roll number is 03070450 For starters, looking at Mr. Borgstrom's brief, our new value is $21,468,000. Mr. Borgstrom will accept that value, but there's an issue with regards to an adjacent parcel of land, and there's a reduction of $351,000 on that. So, which is why my new value is $21,468,000.
Okay.
Property is described as industrial light manufacturing. There's a total of 6 buildings here. The buildings vary in age between 1950 and 2011. With regards to the wall heights being 18 to 20, but I think actually some aspects may be higher, or maybe I'm thinking of a different building. Right. It's zone M2. We have a land area of 1,905,368. And we have a leasable area of 789,716. So it's a very large building. I've never inspected this property, but on page 2, it's a start of some pictures. So it's an old versatile building. It's changed ownership since then. But pages 2 and 3 just show some pictures of where the property is and different views from the main entrance, and just access areas on Clarence and on facing west and east. Page 4 shows an overhead partial picture of that. And if you look at the top of page 4, on the southeastern part of the lot, you'll see this small parcel there.
Rectangular.
The rectangular one, that's where the $351,000 is taken off. And the bottom of page 4 shows a bigger picture of where it's located at, just like in the Fort Garry Industrial Park area. Most of us are familiar with that. Starting on page 5, because I haven't inspected this property, here's some overview pictures from previous Altus briefs. You know, just the building layout, so the reception desk, some general office space, the manufacturing. As you can see on page 7, the manufacturing area is very clean and organized, but you'd expect that from a world-class organization. Top of page 8 is the shipping building according to the notes. Some more manufacturing and shipping areas on page 9. And page 10 shows the parts area. This property is owner occupied. They've been compliant with regards to filling income expense mailers. And there was a sale history of this property 20 years ago in September 7, 2000 for just over $4 million. The property that we have here. So what we're looking at is, because of the layout and because of the different sections here, we have a total leasable area of 789,716 square feet. The blended rate for that is $2.46 to come up with a potential rent of $1,949,989. Using a 2.5% vacancy, expenses of 2% and a shortfall of 3.75%, we're looking at net operating income of $1,789,178. You know, because I'm sure many of you have talked about the heard presentations with regards to 5% off. We used to have the 5% additional percentage taken off, but we've excluded that now, and I could go into further detail of that later. So using 1,789,178 and a cap rate of 8.2%, we come up with a value of $21,819. What we've done for this is, here's some comparables that I have on page 14, showing a range of comparables, you know, that are from $4.22 to $6.53. None of them are 700,000 square feet, hence why we're using $2.46, a lower because of economies of scale. On page 15, we have our cap rate study that we've used. If I didn't mention this beforehand, the effective year that we use for our income stream is 1963 for this building. So what we have here is that the industrial ranges from 5.5 to 9.9%. And page 16 looks at the general overview of what we've done for this year's cycle with regard to the capitalization rate and with regard to non-recoverable expenses. A lot of information with regards to non-recoverable expenses are including issues with regards to commissions and tenant inducements. This property is owner occupied, so that would not be applicable in this situation. And that concludes my formal presentation.
Thank you.
Oh, and I do have a rebuttal package with regards to that, but I'm sure
With regard to
the Altus with regards to why we decided the 5% issue.
Okay.
But I'm open to questions at this time.
Okay, we'll see if Mr. Boardroom has any questions.
I do have some questions, actually. So, I'll ask a number of questions at the beginning. I'm wondering if we might apply them across the board to each of the properties we're in this morning. So
that makes sense.
Okay, and so the valuation that or the assessment that you're defending here is model driven, correct?
That is correct.
And that means model rents.
Yes.
And model capitalization rate.
But with these type of properties, they are so unique in nature. There's not a lot of data here, so there's some subjectivity to it.
Okay. So in this particular case, was subjectivity applied, or is it model driven?
You know what, we'll make adjustments to it, like for example, because of the age and the size of the building, our income quality is poor for this, so that would be the model-driven decision that we made for this, despite the condition of the building.
In terms of rent, but I've asked you about the capitalization rate. Is that model driven, or has it been adjusted?
You know what, I'm pretty confident it has been adjusted.
It has?
Yep.
Now, the vacancy rate that the model has applied here is 2.5%. That's model driven?
That is, yeah, because what we've done is on our analysis of the southwest quadrant, the actual vacancy for a lot of the properties that we've seen is probably around 1% or so. And so what we looked at is that the 2.5 is very indicative of the southwest quadrant of the city of Winnipeg. And there's tons of data supported by various professional real estate firms to support that.
So when you say the southwest quadrant, the city's model excludes the Charleswood and Tuxedo area, does it not?
Well, there's not tons of industrial properties in Charleswood. There's no official industrial park in Charleswood, and I'm confident there's no industrial park in Tuxedo. But that's subjective though. Define Tuxedo. Anything off Keniston?
Well, I'm looking at the 2020, I'll call it manual, for the assessment. The department uses the terms Charleswood and Tuxedo. And it certainly incorporates the area around, for example, Sterling Lion.
Oh, well, that's significant industrial, yeah. But when I'm thinking Tuxedo, I'm thinking Park Boulevard, I'm thinking the residential component of that.
Did the city model consider market reports and establishing capitalization rates?
Definitely.
Okay. So let's take a look at page 15.
Yep.
And in the second paragraph on the top, you'll see there it says, for the 2020 general assessment, capitalization rates were derived from model generated estimates of net operating income and sale prices that were time adjusted. So the model takes estimates of net operating income
Based on mailers that we receive and documentation we receive from sales transactions.
But what it says here is that these capitalization rates were further supported, doesn't say used, further supported, and it goes on to say, or to talk about market reports and external property appraisals, yes?
No, we wouldn't.
It doesn't say that?
We know what I'm saying though is you're implying something which is not what we do. Without using actual data received in the marketplace with regards to sales transactions of industrial properties, it's similar to your cap rate study with regards to the work that you guys do. So you look at what happens in the marketplace and you develop a cap rate.
So let's talk about the rent that's been applied here. Now, if I understand it, the model has a number of factors that go into it, one of them being building size, correct?
That is correct.
And under building size, there are, if I recall correctly, 5 different groupings, yes?
That's correct.
And one of the 5 groupings, or 4 of the 5 groupings, let's the other way, 4 of the 5 groupings deal with property sizes of less than 100,000 square feet, correct?
Yes.
And the last of the groupings deals with everything 100,000 square feet and over, correct?
That is correct.
So the subject property with an area approaching 800,000 square feet would be unusual, correct?
Yeah, and which is why our model, the rent that we're using is so much lower than my comparables.
Okay, so let me take you back to your capitalization rates again on page 15. And so the column, the rows from left to right under industrial, that covers all industrial properties?
Yes.
And there's no breakout or description here for us from which to ascertain what rate might be applied to this property?
Well, the rate applied to this property is 8.2.
You'll agree with me that at almost 800,000 square feet, this building is, as a single occupant property, is unique in the city?
Yes, I would.
And in fact, in terms of manufacturing, there really aren't very many comparables, are there?
That is correct.
And in fact, there aren't any rental comparables of this size either, are there?
Well, it's owner occupied, and most of them are.
Okay, but you're applying a rent to it.
Well, how else would we do market valuation for this type of property?
In terms of rental comparables, there aren't any properties of this size on the market, are there?
Yes, that is correct.
Now, you've noted, I believe, that the effective year built assigned by the department is 1963.
That is correct.
And that's an overall rate.
Yeah.
But the buildings were built over a fairly extended period of time, number of years, starting in about 1950, right?
Yeah, that's what we have in our records.
Now, do you know if the model accounts for wall height?
There is a subjective analysis that takes place.
And
With regards to it, yeah, and
that's
so-
the property quality, and you already indicated that.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So that tries to encompass, if I understand correctly, that
Yeah.
tries to encompass the size of the property, the wall height, correct?
Yes.
And there are, if I understand correctly, 5 categories for that,
Yes.
and there's no flexibility to make a further adjustment to that?
You know, when we look at it, we look at the overall market value and what we feel is fair or not. And that's how we make our estimate.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you. See if the panel has any questions. Mr. Boretsky?
Just a little orientation. Looking at the air photos on page 4. You noted the rectangular, is that a little entry in the orange there that was
Yeah.
mistakenly added in?
Yeah, well, it's listed as a separate roll number, but it's owned by the same organization that owns 1260 Clarence.
Oh, I see.
And so that's why it just figured, you know, that's why Mr. Boardroom and I were discussing about the replot potential there.
Is that, is the area other than that rectangular lot all one title, or
Yeah.
does the title include the rectangular lot?
It's the same ownership group. It's the
Separate
same
title. Yeah,
separate
that's what
separate
title.
roles. Yeah, separate title.
Separate titles?
Yeah.
Okay. The curved portion of the lot there,
Yeah.
is that a road, or is that a drain, or what goes through there?
You know what? I've never been in there. I thought at one point it was. Is it a railway, Brad? Or what is that? I'll ask Mr. Boardroom for that because he has more experience than I do.
I hesitate to chime in here, but
Thank you, Brad.
Perhaps you could say you don't know and you can tell us later
Yeah.
if you will
Okay.
ask you.
Okay. The I&E
Yep.
that you have on page, lots of photos, page
Yep.
11.
Yep.
That was an I&E that was filled in online
That is correct.
by the owner.
By the representative of the owner.
Okay. Has that been altered at all between the time that it was
No,
entered?
what I've done is because Mr. Newfield brought that up as an issue recently. So what I'll always do is I'll always look at the view portion of it. I'll never take. We have so like for example, as you can imagine, in terms of quality assurance of the data that we receive from the general public, we have 2 screens. We have a view and we have an edit. So because Mr. Newfield had brought this up as an issue at a recent hearing, I always make sure I always take the view one, the one that hasn't been edited. and this is the print screen from there. So, because sometimes you may have seen as well, and one of my colleagues showed me this, because sometimes they're not as clean. This is actually pretty clean to read. Sometimes some of the mailers that we get from the print screen to transfer it over, they're not as clean, and I have an example of that in our hearing that Brad and I have in 2 weeks. But this hasn't been altered one way.
And so if something had been taken off or a number had been changed, that would then obviously be a screen print from the edit screen?
Yeah, not the view.
The view screen.
Not the view screen.
Okay, thank you.
I will chime in here and say that I agree with Mr. Follick's comments. I have no reason to believe that any of the information here today has been altered in any way.
Okay, thank you. The cap rate at 8.2. There's a fair range for, would this be the industrial, is it industrial A that I'm looking at? Well, I guess it doesn't really matter. All of the industrials are 5.5 to 9.8. Within that range, what compels the 8.2?
Well, actually, ironically enough, what we've done is we have the ability to be subjective with our cap rates, depending upon the size of it. And so what we've done is we instituted for the 20 cycle, and you may have seen this before as well, sometimes for really large structures, and the same thing we've done with office properties for single tenant office properties, is there's an investment rank that will increase the cap rate by 0.7%. And that's what we've done here. So I believe our normal cap rate for this property would have been 7.5 initially, and we changed it to 8.2, which is that 0.7 difference.
And that's for the 2020 cycle that was instituted?
Yes, because in 18 it was at 8%, the cap rate that we used.
And so that increases of 0.7.
0.7.
0.7.
Yeah, so it would have been 7.5.
And that category is called investment rank?
Well, yeah, in the model,
Okay.
you know,
And why is it called investment rank?
because of the higher risk for such a bigger property. It's just like,
Is it bad investment rank or good investment rank?
well, if the cap rate's going up, that's increasing the risk, right? If the cap rate's going down, if it's a better, then it would go down, you know. So, always at a cap rate, it's always a bit unique, right? Usually more is better, but not in this circumstance. So with a larger property, there's higher risk, which the department acknowledges.
Is it the manufacturing building that is the oldest building, or?
You know what, I've never inspected this, so just based on previous, just looking at Mr. Borgstrom's information that I'll probably discuss later on, but there's aspects of it. So when we look at our brief here, we're showing parts of it built in 1950s, and then on Mr. Borgstrom's brief on page 6 actually gives the layout of it. If I'm looking at it here right now, just roughly speaking, I would say almost half of it was built before 1970. And I think that seems fair.
So manufacturing changes a lot over time.
Yep.
It's a fairly old building. I know this is the income approach, but is there any functional obsolescence of any significance to this building, and does that get reflected in the rent?
You know what? No, it does not. Well, when you say that, we're using a lower rent here, overall speaking, to be respective of the value. We're not using a $5 rent here. So what we've done is we've used the rent to be more reflective of the functional obsolescence of the building.
And do you know what the functional obsolescence is?
I didn't run the cost approach because, we have the capabilities of doing that. And in some regards, the cost approach provides a good sort of indication of value as well. Because when I look at valuation, it's just similar to when I did our demonstration report. It's just like, what's our checks and balance systems with regards to valuation? And so when I'm not sure about the valuation, I'll run the cost report just to see if we're within the ballpark. And so,
Given that there aren't comparable buildings,
yeah.
why not do the cost approach?
I'm not in charge of legislation.
What's the legislation say?
Oh, I just think we've been mandated to do the income approach to value for these type of properties. I believe so. And that's something that there are discussions that have taken place, but we haven't pursued that at this time.
Okay. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Besh?
Just to follow up on the point on particularly the manufacturing component here, would this building be typical manufacturing, including heating, cooling in that building?
Yeah, if 0.5% of the building was built in the 1960s or before 1970, it would be standard of the heating standards that have taken place. I don't have any information with regards to what sort of upgrades that have taken place with regards to their heating and cleaning and their HVAC systems. But if there's a business argument to make the heating more effective, then I'm sure they would have taken the necessary steps to change their heating.
I thought I heard you concur that in fact there may be some obsolescence. I'm trying to understand what that is.
Well, the functional obsolescence would be because it's such a large building, though. I think that's the reason why. It's meeting their needs of the manufacturing, and so you'll see this in Mr. Borgstrom's brief, but there have been improvements, like not significant improvements, but there have been some improvements that have taken place. But not, I guess, how I look at it is that the building suits the needs to be a manufacturer of farm products.
Okay. A point of clarification, and this might be on me, but you've got an assessed value here of 21,819,000. In your presentation, I thought I heard you say a proposed new value of 21,468,000.
Yeah.
And so what is that number, and how did you arrive at that number?
The 21,468,000 was that vacant parcel of land that we were talking about initially.
Yes.
So when I look at Mr. Borgstrom's brief, and when I looked at the property, I acknowledged that that should be a part of one economic unit, which is why I did the $351,000 deduction off of that.
Okay. And then again, I'm looking at page 15, the cap rate. And I think the question has been asked, but wondering if you could put a finer point on the derivation of the 8.2%. I understand the addition of the 0.7, but disregarding the 0.7, how did one arrive at the original 7.5?
That would have been model driven.
That's model driven.
Yeah.
I have no questions.
Thank you. Are all the buildings heated?
I do not know that. I divert to Mr. Bergstrom on that.
So you said the income quality you're using is 4. Is that correct?
The income, where did I say that?
I think you said the income quality is, you classified it as 4.
I don't think I said that.
Maybe I heard you wrong.
Forward, what sort of, oh, that's right. One of the questions that have taken place, we have sizes listed. So we'll have sizes, say, under 15,000, say 15. Yeah, so it's in the class. It's in the size classification.
Okay, and by using the age 1963, that was trying to bring the rates down to?
Yeah, to be more reflective of the fact that, over 50% of the building was built before 1970.
Okay. That's all my questions, thank you.
May I ask?
Yes, go right ahead.
As a result of a comment that you made in reply to Mr. Feit, you said it's a single economic unit.
Yes.
With reference to that rectangular piece.
Yes.
Are you saying that the rectangular piece forms part of a single economic unit with the larger parcel?
Well, we're looking at the land to building ratio, right? And so what happens, it's owned by the same individual. So, and my guess is that, my pictures don't show it here right now, but if they need to utilize that parcel of land, they would. So, is there potential for that parcel to be developed as something else? Potentially, but right now it's owned by That lot is owned by the owners of 1260 Clarence.
And you actually have it on the roll as a separate roll entry?
It's a separate roll number, yeah.
Okay. Yet you're saying it forms a single economic unit with the larger parcel. Why isn't it added to the other roll entry then? You can have multiple parcels in a roll entry.
I don't know the history behind it. It's just that maybe it was owned by a different individual at the time. Like that property, that parcel of land's not on appeal. And so I don't know what took place in 2018, if a reduction had taken place for that in 2018. But, and I can probably double check my notes here. But to me, Mr. Borgstrom's approach to value is correct on that, to take that off.
Okay, so what you're saying is that although you attributed that value in your brief as a response to the appeal, in actual fact, his application only makes reference to the one roll entry and not the other one. And that's why you've made the reduction?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. So, two things before I start. If I may, I would like to periodically check my phone as I am waiting for client instruction on the property we're hearing this morning. My email to them went out last night after hours. I'm waiting to hear. Secondly, as I started talking to you about this property, I wonder if I might just grab some water. So I can tell you that I have inspected this property on more than one occasion. I first inspected it back in the early-ish 1990s when it was the Ford New Holland plant at that time. I can tell you that was in preparation. I was involved with a municipal board appeal at that time. So I can tell you that I inspected it then, and I have also attached some pictures, and I will go through them as we go through this, but I also inspected this property in October of 2017 in preparation for the 2018 appeal when Ascot Property, which is actually Buer, retained us to act on their behalf for this property and their other properties across the province. So I'm going to take a little bit of time here and just go through our brief and give you a little better description of the buildings on the site and the relationship with each other and their physical characteristics to hopefully provide you with a better picture of what's actually on this site. So we have, in terms of the plan area, almost 750,000 square feet under roof. In terms of growth floor area, obviously, because of mezzanine space, it's more than that. But just the plan area on the site is more than 750,000 square feet. That's a lot of roof. Some of the roofs, just one of the buildings here has a sawtooth design. Historically, that building has had issues with leakage just because of its design and our climate. It's not a common construction in our climate, but that building is built like that and it's still there. So I'm going to start at page 2. This is their head office, and while it says Versatile on the sign, I can tell you that they manufacture them. This is Buer Industries. They manufacture farm equipment under license and in their own designs as well. So this facility is a manufacturing facility. It also houses the research and development segment. I took an extensive number of pictures during my inspection, some of which I've included here. None of them you will see here, none of them that I took, were of the research of the R&D section for obvious reasons. But the space there was really no different than the rest of the building that I'll show you as we go through our pictures here. So I want to take you to page 3. And this is the overhead of the site, and you'll see there the little red dot and the extensive structure that surrounds it. That's a structure that, while now it is one sort of entity, it was constructed over a period of years. And I'll go into some details about that. And then there are some other much smaller buildings on the site. So turning to page 4, and we're just going to have some overhead views, and you get a little better idea of what I was talking about there with the little red dot. That's the main building, that's the offices and their main production center. The building on the very left-hand side of that photo, that's their parts building. And then there's a hazardous waste building in here, and then there's a shipping building, and we'll get into that as well. So on page 5, I have actually labeled the various structures on this property and their uses, and then I'm going to go through a bit of a description with them. So the manufacturing building, that's the one at the top of the picture in the middle. Overall configuration is rectangular with numerous additions over time. The roof line, as you look at it from the ground level, effectively has a sawtooth effect. It's very low pitch, and each time they put on an addition, it joins up. So that's not the sawtooth design I was talking about, but it is one of the issues in this building, that because of the joins tracking the water, the thaw freeze, they have some water issues in here from time to time. There's a 2-story office building attached to this plant. That is their corporate head office. Another one of the properties we'll be chatting about today, although not at length, is out on Regent. They don't manufacture farming equipment there. What they do is they manufacture parts they ship them, and they ship them over to this location, and they put them into their manufacturing lines. Interestingly, and I'm going to just talk about it really briefly, there is an extensive paint line in here. That is not accessible. That was found to be not accessible by the municipal board in the appeal in the early 90s, and the order number escapes me off the top of my head. But that paint line was found to be a chattel, personal property, so it's not accessible and hasn't been considered in our evaluation. So the parts building that I just talked about, that's a Butler-style insulated steel building on the very left-hand side of the picture on page 5. There's no office space in this building. There's no need for office space in this building. There are a couple of desks, but basically they have parts in there. When equipment is returned for repair, that's where they stock it from. When parts need to be shipped out, that's where they ship them from for their equipment. The shipping building, you will see, let's back up and let's go through it by the pictures. So if we start on page 18, that's the reception desk on page 18, and you'll see there cubicles. It's not unlike typical office finish where you will have some perimeter offices and interior, I call them prairie dog colonies, interior cubicle designs. Finishes, it allows flexibility of the space, and you'll find less senior staff occupying those cubicles. Similarly, on page 19, I just give you an example of the cubicles and what I was talking about, the perimeter offices. Page 20, and you'll see there on page 20, that's part of the manufacturing plant. So you come out of the offices and you walk through a door and you're in the manufacturing plant. It is a low wall height structure by and large. So the clear ceiling height inside they are utilizing it as it sits, but in terms of modern design, this plant would not be built like that today. It's like that today because of its pre-existence as this facility. If they were to pick up and go somewhere else, the structure would look very different than it does here. As one example, their ability to crane things like engines and other large pieces of equipment around is limited by the clear ceiling height in here. So those are issues with this low wall height. Page 21 are additional pictures of the manufacturing plant. And so now since I've already touched on the parts building. Let's go to page 25. That's the view of the parts building from looking west, so that's the east side of the parts building. You'll see a number of loading bays, loading doors there. They are dock level, which is appropriate. You'll see there that the ground has been excavated to accommodate the dock level loading, and that's not unusual. Page 26 is the inside of the parts building, and again you'll see the racking is limited by the wall height of the exterior and the clear ceiling height. You'll see there not only the supporting stress steel beams, but also the structural steel beams running opposite what I'll call the steel trusses. In this building, page 26 at the bottom, that'll give you a better idea of the clear. So that's what you're looking at there is one exterior wall and the middle of the building. So that'll give you an idea of the clear ceiling height inside of this building. The shipping building is on page 22. This is a structure that contains a small office area and a shop area. It's used for shipping purposes. Interestingly, in this property, the loading docks are actually inside. So the trucks come in the loading dock and they go down a one climb. We'll see the pictures as we go here. So on page 22, this is the concrete roof sawtooth design I was referring to earlier. It is the building that you don't see this design anymore. This is an older structure. And this is the building that has had ongoing chronic issues with water penetration of the roof. You'll see there the loading doors. That's looking towards the north and east from outside this building. So that's the west side of the building looking north and east. You'll see there on page 23 at the top, that's just a little further back. It gives you a better view of the building, and you'll see there some trailers on the right-hand side of the picture. Page 23 at the bottom. This is the inside of the shipping building, and you'll see there that they have some racking. And when I talked about the trucks driving in, you'll see there on page 24, they actually back in so they can have dock level loading out of this building, but they also have grade level loading out of this building as well. So side by side, it is not the most efficient use of space of this building, but it's what it is. Typically, you would find external loading zones. Interior loading docks are an old design. They're not a modern design because of the issues with air quality inside, the inside, the environmental issues, the heating of the space. So if you open the door, drive the truck in, now you've got not only the fumes from the truck, but now you've got all the heat out of the building, so you've got extra heating costs. You don't see these designs anymore. They were quite popular in the late 70s. It's just not done anymore. Certainly not in this climate. Okay, the Leslie building is a masonry type building with some office space in it, and a wall height reported by the city is 18 foot. Going back to page 5 here, that's a small building in the middle. That building was actually locked during my inspection. The chap I went through it with did not have a key, and I took a picture of it, of the inside of it, through the window, but it didn't turn out legibly enough to print. It's a relatively small space. So turning to page, there's also a hazardous waste building on there. This building, if I recall correctly, is not heated. It's where they put their hazardous waste. They store it until they reach a quantity or a load that they can have a vehicle come in and remove the hazardous waste off the site for disposal elsewhere. We go through a more detailed description of the building, the individual components that comprise this property and the different components of this property, and I've broken it down here for you. So the building, and this is on page 6, building numbers 1 to 13. That's the office and the industrial manufacturing building. 14 and 15 are the parts building. 16 is the Leslie building I was just talking about that we couldn't get into. 17 and 18 are the shipping building, and you'll see there that they were built in 1960, and when I was talking about the concrete sawtooth design, that's an old design not used anymore. And then the hazardous waste facility is just its standard Butler building built in 1998. Again, it might be more than 502,000 square feet of this building, or not quite 64%, were built in 1966 and earlier. So it's an older facility. It has, in my mind, an inferior wall height, which poses a risk, and its size poses a risk. And I'll get into that with the cap rate. So I took a look at a number of rental comparables. We applied only an income approach, and we show those on page 10. I know that there were some questions from Mr. Goreski about cost approach. This building is, so the cost approach, in my view, I can tell you that I am Marshall certified for the online software. I've also graduated the IAAO Marshall Commercial Workshop. I actually went down to Nashville for that in the early 2000s. So I understand the cost system. I would never apply it to this property. Cost approach is typically applied to special purpose properties which do not normally transact in the market. This size of property, while it's unusual, has the potential to. I consider the isoboard plant as one example, and I'll talk about that in a minute. You cannot arrive at a reasonable estimate of the effect of age life on buildings of this age. You would not derive a reliable indicator for buildings of this age. Secondly, in terms of functional obsolescence, if you recreated the low wall height, you're essentially recreating the functional obsolescence. You need to quantify it on the market. Similarly, if you're using a cost approach for this building, I'm aware that the city years ago did actually an appraisal on this, and they sent somebody, probably before your time.
Oh, yeah.
They actually sent somebody to some, this is one of a handful of plants of this size in North America. So it's a little unusual in that, and we actually went and we did a special project on it. Department wouldn't release it, not surprisingly, for the Municipal Builders Guild, but I know that one was done on this particular property. So we took a look at a number, in applying the income approach, we took a look at a number of comparables. We have identified all of them. In fact, we have a number of them in common with the assessor's information. I go through a description. I'm happy to go through this individually, but we do describe a number of them. I can tell you that I have in the past inspected 770 Pandora. I have inspected 1370 Sony. I've been involved in appeal work on 1150 Pike and 820 Berry. So I have some familiarity with, I would suggest, the majority of these rental comparables. So based on all of that, and you'll note that the largest of any of the comparables is 347,000 square feet. That's still less than half the size of the subject property. Now, 770 Pandora was once upon a time owned by Palliser Furniture before the brothers split. It was used as part of one of their production facilities. A little unusual because at that time the heat was actually supplied by burning sawdust in this location. And what happened subsequently is that the property had to be subdivided because they couldn't lease out the entire building. Similar circumstance with the Isoboard plant, and I'm certain Mr. Boreski is familiar with that. It was built at a cost of in the neighborhood of $200 million. It's not relevant, but the current assessment on it is about $6 million. But that was including equipment. It was a large building in the Eli area and actually ended up being subdivided in order for it to be leased out. So there was a significant amount of work done on it to get to that point in time. So the rental comparables ranged from $2 a square foot, and that particular rent is index number 9. That's actually Air Park in A20 Barrie. So when you go to the airport, you want to leave your car there, they drive you to the airport in a shuttle, you can park your car there inside the building. So I took a look at it, I took a look at the age of the property, I took a look at the wall height of the property, or considered those factors, the sheer size of it, notwithstanding that there were a couple of smaller buildings that potentially could be leased out separately. Overall, I thought that a rate of $2.30 reflected the market view of a rent for this property, and that's what I've applied in our analysis. I also took a look at the vacancy rates. Now, you'll remember that I asked the assessor about the vacancy rate on their properties. You'll see on page 11 and following, we took a look at the Johnson report, which I know the assessment department subscribes to. This is an independently published report. It has been prepared by Mr. Johnson and prior to him by Mr. Ken Croach. It has been in existence since certainly at least 1995 that I'm aware of. They come out twice a year, once in June, once in December. So I took a look at the Fort Garry vacancy rates as well as the Winnipeg vacancy rates, and we show those details excuse me, in here. In conjunction with this, and I'm going to hop over to it for just a moment and talk about it really quickly. I'm going through it now because we're going to dive into all of the other properties this morning. Bear with me while I locate. There it is. Nope. We've known each other for a lot of years. And I have a sense of humor. There we go. See, I'm better. There have been times when I come in here and actually had to ask to borrow a file. In fact, I think for you. Okay. So we have included amongst our filings this morning for each property our industrial capitalization rate study. I can tell you that I'm the one that prepared this document. People in our office, we have an office capitalization rate study, we have a retail capitalization rate study. Senior individuals within our office actually prepare those documents. I'm the one that worked on this one. So what I want to talk about and contained within this report is industrial vacancy. And so I've gone into more detail in our brief, but I also talk about what's going on in the capital region in general within our capitalization rate report, starting at page 5. So we took a look at what's going on in the different areas, the size of the industrial parks throughout the city of Winnipeg. I can also tell you on page 6 that the development in the RM of Rosser, particularly Brookside Park, west and north. There are also other areas now being developed further up. I can tell you that these lots are being sold as early as 2012. I'm really old. 2012, and that water was supposed to have been in place by April of 2016. From the Westman Co-op, I can tell you that that was late in arriving, but certainly by the reference date for this assessment, it was available and in place. So All of the development in this area is now going full speed ahead. The problem for the city industrial properties is that there is a competitive advantage to these outlying locations in attracting both owners and tenants because there's no business tax out there. So that is about a 10% occupancy cost advantage for these rural locations. On page 7, we did a little analysis of the coming on stream in the arm of Rosser, the arm of Headingley, the arm of McDonald and Headingley, and to a lesser extent Rosser will be in direct competition with Fort Garry. What I haven't shown here, but also impacting the industrial market in general, is in the arm of West St. Paul. And if we've driven around the north perimeter, we've all seen the development of industrials come up on the north side of the perimeter highway. That's again arising from the Westman Water Co-op coming in and becoming available in that area. The Arnold Springfield similarly has some ongoing industrial development out there. What all of that means is that over the last 4 or 5 years, prior to the reference date, of all of the industrial properties or all of the industrial lands coming on stream in the capital region, only about 1/3 were inside the city of Winnipeg. So 2/3 of the industrial lands coming on stream are outside of the city of Winnipeg. There's clearly a demand for it, they're clearly developing it. That poses, in my mind, a risk even to a location like Fort Garry. So coming back to our brief, we've done an analysis or restated, if you will, from the Johnson reports for industrial vacancy. The Winnipeg vacancy, we've also compared it with the Fort Garry vacancy. We need to be cautious in looking at vacancy rates overall, because they will necessarily include both owner-occupied and government-occupied buildings. The owner-occupied buildings will always be 100% full, but they also generate no rent, no different than here. What we are projecting here is if this market was offered on the market, if this property was offered on the market, what would it rent for? What would the likely vacancy rate be given circumstances within the industrial market? By some other factors, and we try and figure out the risk, the return on and the return of your investment for acquiring that property as an investment type of property. So on page 13 of our brief, let me know if I'm going too fast. I'm trying to cover a lot of material here. So on page 13, we took a look at vacancy rates in Fort Garry and Winnipeg as a whole. And you can see there that Fort Garry is lower than the city as a whole or the city in general. But on top of that, you also need to consider collection loss. That's the inability of the landlord to collect rent from a tenant who terminates early, from a tenant who skips without paying rent. If the tenant is in arrears, it's going to take some time and expense to get them out of there. And so that's an additional, that's on our page 13, that's an additional thing that we say needs to be recognized. So based on all of that, we have here included or applied a 4% allowance for vacancy and collection loss. The city has applied 2.5%. We think that 4% more accurately reflects the conditions, not only in the Fort Garry area, but the increased competition in the surrounding area that I've just talked about from our capitalization rate study. We do not disagree with the shortfall rate at $375 a square foot. The non-recovered expenses, I know at least 2 of the panel members have heard that discussion probably more often than they want, and I'm not sure how much detail I should be going into it again. perhaps I'll just touch on the highlights and tell you that it is not a management fee. It is not a mechanism to reduce net effective rents. If you own any property, industrial, an office building, retail mall, you will have costs associated with that ownership that you cannot recover from the tenants. Those are the normal, everyday operating expenses. I can tell you that there was a lot of man-hours put into our non-recoverable expense study. I can tell you that we have looked at a significant number of properties, some of which we show here. But there were a significant number of properties that were studied, but they weren't studied for a single year. They were studied over a period of 3 years to try and figure out what are the trends. Sometimes there will be nothing in a particular year, and sometimes the expenditure will be significant on each property. We then therefore applied 7% in our analysis based on all of that. Now, I appreciate that the city is using 2%. We disagree. And we continue to apply 7%. City has applied an 8.2% cap rate in this case. Again, with consideration, we've got our capitalization rate study. I will tell you that none of the properties in that study is anywhere close to this size. And based on that and based on my experience with a number of industrial properties over time, I've been doing this more than 30 years now. So I can tell you that in my judgment, 8.5% is what I've applied. I could easily justify a rate higher than that, but 8.5% is what I've applied here, with all of the other components of our analysis considered as well. So we go through the mathematics on page 15. And you'll see there our potential net market income, the 4% vacancy rate, non-recoverable expenses at 7%, an 8.5 cap rate. So the capitalized value to the adjustment for 1203 Chevrolet, which is the role that Mr. Pollock was referring to, $17,691,000. The adjustment for 1203 Chevrolet is the removal of that $351,000. One thing I did not tell you, that I probably should have gone over really quickly, if we take a look at page 4 again, and we look at the overhead shot on page 4, you'll see on the top picture on the right-hand side, there's a large number of vehicles parked in there, and in the bottom picture, it's the reverse of it. Looking southward, that's not owned by Viewer or Pasca Properties. Those are lands actually leased from Hydro to facilitate employee parking because the land building ratio is about 2.79 to 1. That's inadequate for industrial properties, and this is an indicator of exactly that point. They have to lease extra land from Hydro to allow their employees to park at this plant. There isn't enough land area to accommodate the manufacturing process and things that are on the site. We haven't deducted for that, but we do make the deduction for the lands at 1203 Chevrolet, which is, the site area is a lot smaller than the parking area we just looked at. So we agree with the assessor, and we'll be seeing another property this morning as well, for which a similar adjustment of an adjacent vacant land is.
That was the one in the Mission, right?
Yeah, it will be made as well. So the department has agreed with that approach, and we don't dispute that. In the end, we're looking for a reduction to $17,340,000. And with that, I am open to questions.
Thank you.
I'm sure there's more than one.
And some of it, Brad, is just learning, right? Because you referenced some things, and I want to make sure you got a history of how big is the Isobord building? What do you like? The old Isobord building, how big is it?
It was in excess of 100,000 square feet.
Okay. So, but it was nowhere near this sort of size, though?
No.
Big for Eli, but. And so.
I'm pretty sure it was about 100,000 square feet.
Okay.
Little north of there.
The Sawtooth building,
Yeah.
is that what it
Which
is?
one?
Okay, well, the point is I'm just trying to look at, in terms of our market valuation, how many square feet is that in total?
So
All the saw, no.
So when you look at the menu, so let's take a look at page 5. And you see the manufacturing building there?
Yep.
So the little sort of brown roof on the left-hand side of that, that's the office.
Okay,
And everything to the left of that, because of the nature of the additions and the type of construction,
Okay.
that's all sawtooth.
okay, so it all came down from there, so it's at the top and then just sort of.
That's a low pitch, right?
Okay, yeah,
Sorry, I'm not understanding where that is in this
Okay,
photo on page 5.
might I approach?
Sure.
yeah.
Because you've got a ground level photo farther along.
That's different.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's a
You've got
second
two
one.
sawtooths?
That's a
You've got two
second one that I'm
sawtooths.
going to talk
Is
about.
that the shipping one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right.
So this
Yeah.
is some of the sawtooth that I was just talking about, and the other one is going to be down here in the shipping building.
Okay, so this one, is,
Okay.
the sawtooth is kind of like this,
Yeah.
whereas the shipping building
It's
is.
more
Yeah.
pitched.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. And the manufacturing structure is simply a function of the number of additions that have happened over the years. Structurally, you're not going to be able to raise the roof to be a single pitch, and so that's what they've ended up with. Okay, so the second sawtooth building is going to be the shipping building, but not all of it. So when you look at page 5, and it's a little difficult to make out, but you'll see a gray roof there by the shipping building on page 5.
Okay.
Do you see that?
I see the shipping building. Is
Okay,
it-
but that's all one structure. So if you look at the gray sort of area, that's a gray roof, right? That's not sawtooth, that's metal.
Okay.
Okay. The structure to the below and to the right of that,
To the south, okay.
that's the sawtooth structure that I'm talking about. And so that's the picture that you will see on the outside on page 22. So there you will see the sawtooth, then there's a masonry addition, then there's a steel, a butler style building addition to that. Okay?
So page 22
Yeah.
is in the southeastern part of the lot, just below
That's the
shipping
shipping
area.
building, yeah.
Okay. So, and you don't know how many square feet that building is by any chance, do you?
I do. So if you look on page 6,
Yeah.
that'll be numbers 17 and 18. That's the shipping building and its office.
17 and 18, and what's the square
Those are-
footage?
Well, those are assessment department records.
Okay.
We've included that at the rear of our submission, but those are all within your records.
Okay. But you know, it's,
And they're within your records, but we're also going back to our work on the early 90s appeal to look at it.
17, okay. Okay, perfect, thanks Brad, it's 96. I'm just wanting to see, yeah, it doesn't matter, Chuck, with what we have, okay, excellent. Questions? How did you come up with the $2.30?
Just experience and judgment.
Just experience and judgment, so you're saying it's subjective in nature?
There is no mathematical formula upon which to base an estimate of market rent.
So if we had a model generated of $2.30, would you have come in with $2.15?
Probably not. I took a look at the rental comps,
Yeah.
and that's what I came up with.
So if you're looking at your rental costs here and your adjustment,
230 is my opinion on this property.
what's that?
230 is my opinion on this
Okay.
property. When I'm looking at these properties, I don't care what the model rent is.
Okay.
I'll look at it and I will look at the model rent in terms of whether or not the market rent that I look at, the rental comparables support that. And I don't know if there's any today, sometimes the model rent that is applied, I don't disagree with.
Yep.
Sometimes I do disagree. This is one of those cases where I disagree.
Okay. So I was just asking the hypothetical question, if we would, so you would have used $2.30 no matter what?
That's my opinion.
Okay. No problem. Other than the Johnson report, did you look at any other reports that were in the marketplace?
In terms of vacancy?
Vacancy?
No, the Johnson report is actually very detailed. It breaks, it's got a number of categories, retail, office. I brought excerpts of the industrial component of it. It breaks it down into 11 areas in the city, ranging from Transcona all the way to St. James, West End. So it's an independently published report. There's a significant amount of detail that goes into Mr. Johnson's survey of the markets, plural, in terms of the different property types. And in industrial, in my mind, it would be the one to rely on.
Okay. So, would you agree with the statement, does one sale make a market?
No.
No. Okay, so would you say, with regards to vacancy, would one report establish a vacancy rate, or would it be beneficial to look at what other reports say?
That's apples and oranges, because the one market report covers hundreds of, well, I would suggest thousands of properties that include all the properties.
So the data...
In terms of industrial, we'll cover hundreds of properties.
So the data, the industrial reports done by Cushman Wakefield, by the Capital Group...
They show for Winnipeg overall. They do not show...
I do believe
that I understand. They don't.
They do have quadrants. They do separate industrial by quadrants.
In this particular case, Mr. Johnson provides us with a significant breakdown by actual area and the experience semi-annually, twice a year for those years. And in our brief, we've repeated or restated the 10 years experience from that report, just to show the trends.
Okay.
So that's, and I know the department subscribes to it as well. It's a very reliable report. We continue to subscribe to it. And we expect it.
But in your analysis, you don't consider other reports. You only look at the Johnson report, correct?
For this, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Is there an industrial market in Winnipeg that has a lower vacancy rate than the Southwest Quadrant?
Mr. Johnson reports Murray Park at 0.
Okay.
And he's reported Fort Garry at 2017. Murray Park at 0, Fort Garry at 0.4.
And is that...
He's also reported the Exchange District, which curiously does still have some industrial.
But isn't Fort Garry
That's also at 0.
Isn't Fort Garry in the same region that we're looking at right now?
Isn't
the Clarence property located in Fort Garry?
I agree with that.
Okay. You know what? It's going to be a long day. No other questions.
Thank you. Let's see if the panel has Mr. Pesh questions.
Thank you for your summary of the property. One of the things that strikes me as I look through the pictures, it looks like there are a multitude of loading docks on different walls. From the inside, at least, and in a couple of the inside pictures, looks like there's 1 or 2 overhead doors. How many overhead doors in total, and on how many walls?
So there are some on the manufacturing building, there are some on the south and south-facing west walls. There might be a really limited number on the west-facing wall of the manufacturing plant. Most of those loading doors you saw there were on the parts warehouse.
Okay.
So they don't need a large number of loading doors in the manufacturing plant because they drive the tractors outside or the equipment outside and that's where they load them up and drive them on flatbeds and away they go. but I don't recall, and I don't have the notes here, I don't recall the exact number of loading doors in the manufacturing plant. It's pretty clear that there are, let's say, half a dozen on the parts. There are 3 on the shipping warehouse, 2 of which are for internal purposes, including the one where you drive down the ramp and top level inside. The hazardous waste building obviously doesn't have any. The little shed, the Leslie building, the storage building has, I believe, 2. Could be 3, but I believe 2. Grade level.
So it sounds like there are multiple doors in these buildings, and the reason I ask the question is, should the owner want to lease the building, would it be possible then to create a multitude of spaces for a multitude of tenants?
Anything is possible.
Yes.
In terms of the main structure, I think it's possible with the parts building.
Yes.
But now you're going to have to add office space.
Yes.
I'm not sure who'd want to rent the shipping building. But again, it's possible. Hazardous waste, no. The Leslie building could potentially be leased out on its own, but the manufacturing plant, the big one that is 655,000 square feet of plan area, is not suitable. You've got the office structure at one end, which and this area is not an office rental market. So you would have to find a tenant that wants that amount of office space with however much of the industrial space. It's possible to wall it off, I suppose, but there would be a significant capital expenditure involved in doing that. And anybody that's in there for a plant of that size, I would suggest that the number of loading doors in this plant are insufficient. I will give you the example of 1370 Sony Place, one of my rental comparables. I could talk about that one because I've been involved in previous municipal appeals and I've inspected it. That property used to be, still is owned by Genesis, but it used to be the largest distribution warehouse in Western Canada. It was built with some unique features to it. One of them being the warehouse area originally had windows in it. The warehouse was fully air conditioned. So Mr. Cohen, when he built it, he was treating his employees well. But when Sam and Red Apple kind of went by the wayside, they ended up subdividing it. And I can tell you that by subdividing it, there were some expenses in that, including a major expenditure to provide doors at the front. The north-facing building. If you're driving down McGilvery, you can't miss it. Those loading doors that are on the east side of the building where the warehouse is, if you're visualizing the building, those loading doors didn't used to be there. All the loading used to be at the back. So they went through a great amount of expense to attract the tenant, through his distributors, to attract the tenant to occupy that space because it wasn't leasable in its current configuration, and we need to remember that we are valuing these properties in their current physical condition. So while anything is possible, it would require a significant investment.
Is the entirety of the plant being utilized?
Yes. I should put a caveat on that. When I inspected it, it was. Business was really good. And as the farm industry does this, so does the production. And so what happened, I have to tell you that when I went through there was a lot of brand new equipment sitting there. And I'm looking at one of the executives who was touring me through the plant. And I asked him, that's a lot of money sitting there. And he goes, well, our salespeople assure us they're all sold. And I went, okay. But he also said much of what they do depends on what's happening in the farm industry, right? And so, I guess I can't talk about China and canola, but certainly there have been past periods of time where the farm industry has performed very poorly. That impacts their production and the amount of the space that will occupy in there.
Great, thank you. You spent a great deal of time, I think, trying to punctuate the functional obsolescence of the building, the ceiling heights ranging from 18 to 20 feet, but it sounds like production has continued there. And in fact, if you could maybe confirm for me that the amount of space that is currently being utilized there perhaps is inadequate in that parts are being produced elsewhere and being brought to this facility, or is this?
No. Okay. In any kind of, manufacturing is an appropriate term. I would also phrase it as assembly. Okay. So they don't make the tires and the rims there. They bring them in. They don't make the parts for the various farm equipment. They make it elsewhere, including at property on region that we're looking at today. And then they bring them in. So it's not unusual at all. For components, they don't make the engines there. So it's not unusual at all for components to be brought in a facility type of as this. What I did and why I talked about the wall height in this property is what is modern industrial expectation. And when you look at the, and you go into it, the broker reports, and Mr. Folek has referred to them as well, we have in our study, we include the benchmarks. And Colliers talks about wall height, size. When you drive out Route 90 and you see the construction south of the perimeter, you see the construction going on out there, nothing is being built out there today, or since the park started being developed, with 20-foot wall height. It's all going to be 24, 26, 28. Much of it multi-bay, 5,000 to 10,000 square feet in size. There will be built-to-suit buildings out there, typically by owners, and they will also be not 20-foot wall height. That is, in terms of modern industrial expectations, deficient and substandard.
On a number of occasions, you made mention to the sawtooth roof, and you also made a reference to leakage of the roof. I wonder if the leakage of the roof applied only to the sawtooth roof, the two sawtooth roof structures.
Well, all roofs will eventually leak, right? Of course. And so they'll come and repair them periodically. They'll replace them. The sawtooth design, in particular, in the manufacturing building, because of the nature of the additions that were, however wide they were, and the depth of the building. That's the nature of it. I didn't see any issues when I inspected the property, but I was made aware of it. And certainly during our inspection in the 90s, the shipping building with the concrete sawtooth, that was an issue.
Sounds like business continues, production continues, despite some of the things that you've described with the roof and ceiling heights and other things.
They fixed the leaks, and I haven't made allowance for it. I did make note of it. The ceiling height, yes, it's possible to subdivide, but you also need to find somebody that's willing to take the clear ceiling height that's available in there. That's not to modern industrial standards. So when you look at and one of my rental comparables is up the street, figuratively speaking, the old distribution building in Sunny Place.
Yes.
That has, I think, 34-foot wall height in the warehouse, and that's a 1980s building. So when you talk about older and more, in fact, they had a very elaborate way back when they were still operating right up on the sound. They were using the full ceiling height, full wall height. They had a very elaborate system of conveyor belts to move merchandise around, but they were utilizing the entire wall height.
I'm sorry, I continue to be unclear on how you arrived at the leasable rent. I'm looking at your comps on
Yeah.
page 10.
It's experience and judgment. It's a judgment.
There's no arithmetic.
I wish there was. It would make my job a whole lot easier, but there is not.
It's hard when there's no comparables, right?
I get it, yeah. All right.
I would love to have a building next door, 750,000 square feet in size that was rented. Make my job so much easier.
Mr. Bertsky, any questions?
I guess on that point, given its uniqueness and size and that sort of thing, forming this as a question, I guess, the next time that this is appealed, the panel will be assured that we're getting really up-to-date, full inspections done by both sides. So we really know.
So let me address this because we'll get into trouble.
Yeah.
So let me give you this week as one example. I have between 45 and 50 briefs due this week. Not counting Monday
Okay, I
briefs.
can see where you're going.
So
Nevertheless,
yeah, and so I can tell
our
you.
hands are somewhat tied
Yeah.
by having fairly dated
Well, and see, I
information
don't-
or information
I
that
don't think-
questions that can't be answered.
I don't think of 2017 as being dated, and that's when I most recently inspected this property in preparation for the 2018 appeal.
Thank you. Would you agree that the value of a property is partly dependent on how well it works for the owner or a potential buyer in terms of how well they can function?
Not
in
for
it?
the owner. We are not here to determine value and use.
It is the owner potentially one of the buyers?
Right, and if they weren't in this location, and I think...
Okay, I'll get to that part.
I already...
Let me complete my question.
Okay, sure.
I'd like to know a little bit more about the manufacturing and distribution process, because I believe that has some bearing on the value of this property. When I look at it, it certainly looks like the land area is consumed. What I'm not really understanding is there's obviously a lot of parts coming in on large trucks. Functionally, how well does this property work for bringing parts onto the property effectively? The shipping building is it's surprisingly small in a way. It is remote from the manufacturing building. There is an awful lot of stuff on the ground here. How well does this property work for large trucks coming in to take implements away?
Well,
what is that process?
So
and how does it work?
So let me talk about both ends of that. In terms of pieces coming in, the trucks come in. The trucks do not drive into the manufacturing plant. They unload them externally and they bring them in with forklifts. But the tires, the engines, they're fairly large and fairly heavy. In terms of shipping out, they don't bring the trucks in and load them up. They drive the farming equipment outside. Whether it's a combine or a tractor, they drive it outside. And outside, they drive it up onto the flatbeds for delivery to wherever they're going.
And there's no problem with orienting the flatbeds, that sort of thing, getting them in and out of the property?
I don't believe
works
there's-
well for the owner?
Well, the issue of orientation doesn't really matter. If you're driving your farming equipment up onto the flatbed, it doesn't matter how it's oriented, you're going to drive it out there. I do know that when a flatbed comes in there, that they really don't want multiple flatbeds in there at the same time. It's just, when you look at the overheads, there are issues.
Okay.
Sorry, just to interrupt, and everybody kind of skipped over the question. So you asked about that little curved piece of land. That's a real spur.
Okay.
What was that part? The curve piece?
Real spur.
Oh, yeah, okay, I thought it was, okay.
They don't use it,
Yeah.
to my knowledge, but it's runs adjacent.
So, although the the owner might be a potential buyer. Certainly there's lots of other potential buyers that one has to consider. And if they need a property that offers the utility of this one, they're buying a property that is certainly older. Maybe it's got some locational issues, transportation issues, configuration issues, that sort of thing. Would a potential buyer just be looking in the Fort Garry area? Is there something about this location that would be crucial, or would it be anywhere in the city? And I'm looking at vacancy, Fort Garry, vacancy across the city. What is the better one to take a look at?
I typically look at area specific, and you'll see that as we come through some other ones today. So two things. You talked about the owner of this property, and so if the owner was to be considered one of the potential purchasers of this property, I would suggest to you that they wouldn't be here, that they would be in a completely different location with a better physical structure. The age, so when we're talking about wall height, we need to consider clear ceiling inside, right? So you've got typically steel web trusses, and underneath that you've got supporting steel beams, steel I-beams to support those steel trusses. And you can see the pictures inside. So what we show as wall height, you actually have less than that clear ceiling. It happens to be in this location because over the years that Ford and Holland was there, and subsequent to them, they acquired this, and that's why this plant is there. If they were to go out, and if they weren't to be here, if they were coming into Winnipeg, this isn't the location that they would be at. In terms of transportation and in terms of physical structure. Caterpillar, let me give you one example, for their repair facility, built a property on Inkster. I can talk about that because it's client. Much higher wall height, big equipment, much higher wall height. They didn't build it with 19-foot wall height. So as you drive up Route 90, you'll see it on the east side of Route 90 as you approach Inkster from the north. As one example. So when manufacturers such as this, while they are as a matter of legacy in this location, this is not where they would be if they didn't start here. If they were
When did they start here? Sorry, when did they take it?
well,
Ford and Holland?
whenever they bought it from Ford and Holland. I'm trying to remember.
There was a sale in 2000.
Well, it was before then.
Okay.
I'm certain it was before then.
Okay.
But Ford New Holland, if I recall correctly, closed down or filed for Chapter 11. But I'm going by memory, and I can't make that statement with certainty, but they acquired this property, or they acquired the business, and that's why they're here. And then Mr. Bueller, who once upon a time ran the company, subsequently sold the company to offshore people.
That's all my questions.
Thank you. I think all mine have been asked and answered.
I just got one question though. So how many doors were there in total?
Oh gosh.
It was, I don't think there was a final
No,
answer.
I was just curious. So could you estimate, Brad? Because you've been, you know what I mean? Would you say?
Not a lot, and certainly not a lot for a building.
I won't worry about adding it because
I believe there's one, perhaps two on the west side of the manufacturing building.
yeah.
There is 2 or 3, perhaps 4 on the south side of the building.
Yeah.
And that's it for the manufacturing plant, to the best of my recollection.
Perhaps the assessment department could do an inspection.
Possibly. The parts building.
But it goes to the municipal board, then maybe. Anyways,
Let's hope not.
Yeah, anyways.
So the parts building
Okay.
has obviously a lot more doors.
Yeah.
Because that's what they need for the trucks.
Yeah, okay.
In this place, in the manufacturing plant, as it currently exists, all they need to do is be able to drive the equipment out the door.
Yep.
Or bring the parts in through the door. So it's not a distribution center.
Okay. Yep, okay, for sure. Just,
That's,
just, the other question is with regard, no, I'm just.
That's where they're going.
No, and I apologize. So would you say the work done at the Region facility is sort of like Magna International providing parts to an auto manufacturer? Like, is there similarity between that? I'm just asking that.
Well, Magna produces
Parts.
different types
Yeah.
of parts. The manufacturing that's going on in the Regent Avenue facility is different.
Okay, no problem, okay.
Yeah.
And is this 18 municipal board? Is it
Mr.
municipal
Foley.
board? Okay.
Foley.
Which one?
This property here?
No.
No? Okay. Thank you.
any,
We talked about this last night.
I kept, sorry, I'm
Yeah.
back. Yeah, I'm
Ordinarily,
tired.
I don't look at.
Yeah, I know.
and
I'm just
look at
tired.
what the old assessment
Yeah.
was. But he asked on last night, and so I remember, right?
Okay.
So we took a look at
we'll
it.
see if,
This board reduced the 2018, we were looking for a lower value on construction, we did not appeal for it.
any summation?
I think we're good.
I think all of the points have been made and all the questions have been answered.
Thank you. I think we'll take a short break and we'll come back.
10, 12-hour days.
Okay, we'll call the meeting
Yep.
back to order. And we will deal with item number 2 on the docket, 2627 Pembina Highway.
Yep.
And Mr. Froelich, if you'd like to
Yep.
take us through.
File number is 19-3172. Roll number is 030618741100. Property is located at 2627 Pembina Highway. We're looking at assessed value of $2,021,000. Property 60T. Parcel use is listed as industrial light manufacturing. There's 3 buildings on it. The ages of the building range from 1973 to 2004. It actually used to be an old car dealership at one point based on the notes that we have here. We have the land area of 63,113 and we have the leasable area of 20,419. However, we are looking at this property due to the location in the south and off Pembina Highway, very close to the University of Manitoba, as vacant land. So on page 2, what we're looking at here is we're looking at the actual building currently. There's 2 components of it, mainly it's the Corel's water, they do water. And there's a retail portion of it, and then where the garage is on the overhead door that you see on the left-hand side, it's a garage. That's where they keep their trucks. I inspected the property on January 1st. I drove by there because I wanted to see it. So I didn't go inside of it, but I could confirm that is a parking garage or just utility. On page 2, you're looking at the subject property here, with regards to where it's located on Pembina Highway. And page 3 gives you the big picture view of it. So as you can see here, we're looking at it's just south of Chancellor Matheson and Bison Drive, and just to the north of Dalhousie, and where it's located out on page 3. Property owner has been compliant with regards to filling out income and expense value information. And there was a sale on this property that took place on February 2nd, 2010 for $2,050,000 in 2010. On page 5, we have the sales mailer that was accompanied with the sale transaction as legislated. So we're just looking at the details here on, showing that it sold on February 2nd, 2010 for $2,050,000. Is the consideration paid? Yes. When was the agreed upon sale date? Was December 2009. There is a note here that the purchaser had previously bought the business from the vendor and the property was paying for the rent to the user for the vendor. Were there any other transactions with a part of it? No. Is there a leaseback agreement between vendor and purchaser? It says yes. Is this, no, pardon me, I read that wrong. No leaseback agreement. Is the sale full interest? Yes. Is there a single tenant covering it? No. And just all the details of it. Is the intended use going to be the same? Yes, it is. And just some of the other additional details there. On page 6, we look at the financing arrangements that have taken place here right now, which is 8 years away from the reference period. There was a cash down component of it of $717,000 and $717,500. And there was a mortgage taking place out with Cambrian Credit Union at 225 Broadway for $1,332,500, 65% of it at an interest rate of 5.5%. And we're just looking at on question 31 on income expense information. Was all or part of this property tenant occupied at the time of sale? Yes. Was the purchase trust based on the property's net operating income? No. And were there any financial details or investment prospectus available? No other prospectus. And that concludes page 6. So now what are we looking at here right now? So because we value this property on land, what I've done here is I've taken 4 sales. Some of them are combined with regards to components 2 and 4. But the point is it shows you an indication of where the trends are with regards to the land value prices that have taken place. So for group 1, we have a sale on Pembina Highway and Cloutier Drive. So I'll be referencing page 7 and then going throughout my brief. So this property is just located outside the perimeter. It's inferior to the subject property, because it's just outside of the perimeter. And it's also a sale that's 5 years away from the reference date in 2013. And it was 67,227 square feet at $11.16. So on comparable 2, just shows you an overview of that property here. For comparable 1 is right below that. Comparable 2 is on 23 Pembina Highway. It was the area of Montcalm, also vacant commercial. The sale price for this property was in October of 2012. Sold for $2.9 million, $59,493. So it's slightly smaller than the subject property at $48.75. And now we can look at the next page on comparable 2. So what they ended up doing there, for those who are familiar with it, that used to be the Montcalm Hotel. They tore that down and made condos there, which is similar to a lot of development that's been taking place on Pembina Highway because huge demand, people want to be by the university. And you'll see in one of my final pictures here where a development took place where I never thought the development would occur. Referencing comparable 3 and 4, it's on 2525 Pembina Highway. It's right at the corner of Bison Drive and Pembina Highway. And if you guys are familiar with it, this is the building that caught on fire just before Christmas. It's the large, I think 11, 12-story multifamily building that's being built right there. Good location, high, for a variety of reasons. There's 2 sales on this. So there's the initial sale, and then there's there's a second sale that was a part of it. So the first sale that we have that took place in April of 2016 is for $67.04. And the second one, which is the buyer's motivated, I'm not implying that the market rents are $128 a square foot, but there was a second sale that took place in December of 2016 for $53,721, which was for $128 a square foot. So what I have here on page number 9 here, it's just where it's located at. So comparable 3 and 4, it was the Dairy Queen at one point, and it was replotted for multifamily. So if we're looking at the top of page 9, it's that vacant parcel that's just to the north of it. And then subsequently the bottom of it shows you the old Dairy Queen on page 9. And then page 10 shows where the construction's occurring. So what they've done is they've taken the old Dairy Queen lot, tore that down, and now they're building this large multifamily. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe 15 floors. that will be taking place on the bottom of page 10. And so if we look at 11 here, and this was interesting that I had on appeal. So just to the south of the subject property, we're looking at the location of where a Burger King and a TD Canada Trust is. So on Pembina Highway, great location. You know, these buildings have been there for a long period of time. And then if you look at the bottom of page 11, it got replotted, and they developed a parcel of land at the very back. And you know, and I apologize to you to the lack of time because I don't know what the square footage is of that, and I apologize. So what happens here is at the bottom of page 11, they used the land off Pembina Highway to build a multifamily complex. And for me, that seems astonishing because if they could do this to a back portion behind a Burger King and a TD, obviously they could do a potential multifamily development at 2627 Pembina Highway. It's 63,000 square feet of land. There is potential for some type of multifamily. On page 12 here, what we're looking at is we're showing the current layout of the building. So the original one is where on the north part of the encircled part of the green is where the TD Canada Trust is. Bottom portion is where the Burger King is. And on to the left of that, that shows where the multifamily building is. And subsequently, on the bottom of page 12 is what we have here. So when we look at, so just as an overall view of this building here per se, we have an assessed value of $2,021,000. The current use is being underutilized. The highest and best use for this property is not in its actual existence. And so when we're looking at that, we're saying, I understand people are using it, they're motivated to use it right now, but if a developer came to wanting to purchase this property for any reason, what would the owners want to sell it for? He'd be knowledgeable, he would look at market information with regards to sales. And so we have that information there with regards to the actual, what the sale prices are. I've taken properties that are on Pembina Highway, so we know land values aren't going down on Pembina Highway. Huge increase for it. Prices are going up. You can see them utilizing parcels of land here that were never utilized. I never thought in a million years that they would have put an apartment block there. And then we're also looking at the sale that took place in 26. There are not any sort of outstanding factors that are taking place that would suggest that a bank wouldn't give 65% equity for a value which is slightly higher than the proposed value set up by the agent at $1.4 million. I honestly believe that the value that we have here is fine. We've used a land value, and you can reference this here. If we take the assessed value of $2,021,000 at $63,113, we have a sale price of $32.02 a square foot. In my eyes, this is being very fair and reasonable as a value. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Any questions? Mr. Morrison, questions?
Thank you. So we're going to start with your sales questionnaire that you show on page 5. Now, on the sales questionnaire, it's indicated that the purchaser of the real estate had previously acquired the business from the former owner, correct?
Yep.
And as a result of that transaction, the former owner retained the real estate, yes?
Say that again?
The former owner retained the real estate, correct?
The real estate? Yeah. I'm just looking at the information that's been provided to us.
So let me start again. The information on your page 5 and 6, let me see if I understand the story correctly. This property was purchased in February of 2010.
Yes.
Is this the sale price that you're relying on?
This is one aspect.
Is this a sale price you're relying on?
No.
And in fact, when we look at this document a little closer, the purchaser of this property in February of 2010 had previously acquired the business operations in this location, correct?
Yes.
And they were carrying on those business operations in this location, correct? Yes?
Yes.
And so do you know if this building was put up on the open market?
No, I don't believe so.
Would it be fair to say that a tenant, given that they've established their business in a particular location, may be prepared to pay more than market so as not to disrupt business operations?
Not in all circumstances.
Talking about this circumstance.
I don't know the details of the transaction.
Fair enough. Now, you made reference to the amount of the mortgage on the property, correct?
That is correct.
Are you relying on that as an indication of value?
No, I provided sales comparables of properties.
So have you investigated what other undertakings and personal guarantees might have been?
We don't have access to that information.
Well, if you pull the mortgage document, certainly.
Actually, I think I did, actually. Maybe. Can't even remember now. I can't recall, I'm sorry.
Fair enough. Do you know who Kate Everett is?
She's the person who signs the...
Do you know the Everett family here in Winnipeg?
I represent the city of Winnipeg. I don't represent the owner.
Let me suggest to you that the Everett family can simply sign on the line for whatever amount they want. You don't know.
I don't know, but I'm not basing my valuation on the Everett family. I'm basing my valuation on comparable land sales.
Okay, and so let's turn to that. So if I understood your testimony correctly, or your evidence correctly, the assessment of $2,021,000 is based on the land value?
That is correct.
And how much does that work out to per square foot?
It was in my brief.
Wow.
$32. Around $32.
Fair enough. Now, the property is improved with some structures, correct?
That is correct.
Would that require an adjustment for demolition costs?
I think the $32 rent that we have as a model generator rent is being more than generous.
It's not a model generated rent.
Well, so let me rephrase that. The $32 a square foot is being very generous, which factors in the cost of demolition.
Okay. And in determining that, you're relying on the 4 sales you show on page 7?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you indicated that Pembina Highway is a high-demand area? Yes?
I would say so, yes.
So, in each of these cases, if we accept your theory of the high demand, in each of these sales, wouldn't the subject property itself have presented an opportunity for somebody to acquire that if they needed the land?
My valuation is based on highest and best use. And so there's multiple developments that could end up taking place here. I believe the current use is being underutilized.
Okay, so let me ask you the question again. For your sale number 2,
Yes.
right, that's a sale of 59,493 square feet.
Yep.
You say that that was vacant land at the time of sale?
I guess you didn't listen to my presentation, Mr. Boardroom. I previously said that it was the Montcalm Hotel.
Do you know if that property was on the market at the time of sale?
You know what? I don't recall.
So when you say previously, at the time of sale that you showed here, was it the Montcalm or was it vacant land?
Well, regardless of the point, if they purchased it with the hotel on it, which I don't know, and if they demolished it, that tells me that the actual price per square foot would be significantly higher than the $48, because then they would have to deal with the cost of demolition.
So you are familiar somewhat with hotel operations, correct?
I've never taken one on appeal.
And so would it be fair to say that a hotel operation is a going concern business?
I don't have enough experience.
At the time of sale, is it your suggestion that they acquired the Montcalm Hotel?
You probably know the details of the sale better than I do.
This is your evidence.
Yeah, I understand that. And what I'm saying, though, is, while I may not know all the details of the Montcalm Hotel, it's my belief that the Montcalm Hotel was there, and I may be wrong. It was there beforehand. They tore it down because the highest and best use for this property was not the current use of the Montcalm Hotel. Let me finish. You asked the question, so let me finish. So the Montcalm Hotel, the highest and best use for the hotel was no longer in existence anymore. They felt there was more value to be generated as another business operation. They made the decision to build condos there. They built condos there. I understand that. In my evaluation of this property here, the highest and best use for this property is not in its current usage, but as vacant land as other potential. They could tear that down, they could put a split, they could put a variety of other business operations there that would generate a higher market value than what you're seeking here today. Thank you.
You done?
I'm done.
Okay, so the vendor in this case of the Montcalm Motor Hotel sold going concern business, correct?
I don't know the terms of the sale.
Isn't that an important consideration in determining whether or not this is a land value?
Okay, but
Now, let me ask the question. If it's a vendor selling one thing, and a purchaser acquiring that thing but intending it for a different use, does not the IAAO standards suggest that you're not to consider that sale?
they may say that. I'm not familiar with that aspect of the IAAO. But what happens here is that we also know that in circumstances the IAAO says that you shouldn't do portfolio sales and cap rate studies, and you guys include that in your information here. So we need to be consistent, Mr. Boardroom.
Let's talk about your comparable number 3. Do you know if, on your page 7, do you know if that property was on the market at the time of sale?
It looked like two different buyers, like from two different parties. So it may have not been on the market. I did not see any information. Let me finish. I did not see any information that it was an open market transaction.
So I'm talking here about your comparable number 3.
Yes.
You didn't see any evidence to suggest that it was an open market transaction?
I did not come across any data to support that.
And is it fair to say that there was a restaurant operation on that location?
I don't recall. Part of it was because it's the Dairy Queen, which I've acknowledged.
Your sale number 3. Right? So if you take a look at your page number 9, the bottom picture shows the address, and so does the top picture shows the same structure. The bottom picture shows the address of 2525 Pembina Highway, presumably, yes?
Yes.
And in your, to your knowledge, is that the Dairy Queen operation?
If you look at the top of page 9 of my brief, that's what I believe it's to be.
Okay.
And actually, when I looked at the records, I pulled the old tax records, and it did look like Dairy Queen.
And so, in looking at your page 7, it looks like that site was 28,715 square feet in size?
No.
That's the information you have here?
Yeah, I do believe so, yeah.
Okay. And so, your sale number 4 appears to include sale number 3 and some additional lands, correct?
There's a replot there, yes.
A replot. And so at some point in time, and if we look at your page 9 again at the bottom picture, you'll see there the sort of rounded edge site. So it appears at least that those lands were acquired at some point subsequent to that sale, correct?
I don't get you exactly. I'm sorry.
Well, if your sale number 4 includes all of the lands outlined in
Yep,
purple here
both
at the top,
both in north, yep.
would you then conclude that at some point in time, subsequent to the sale of the Dairy Queen restaurant, that those lands immediately above here were also acquired?
Well, yeah, because, yes.
It must be so,
Yeah,
correct?
of course, because it's under one roll number right
You know what
now.
that sold for?
Would not have sold for the 128.44.
This is your evidence I'm asking you about.
Based on my analysis, it looks like that it sold for 128.44 once it was amalgamated.
Right, and so what I'm talking about is prior to amalgamation, they had to have acquired the site at the bottom picture here, yes? It's around the corner?
Yep.
Do you know anything about that sale?
The Sale number 3 or sale number 4?
The sale of the lands immediately to the north of the Dairy Queen with the rounded corner.
We didn't have any data on that.
You didn't have any data on
Nope.
that?
Or I didn't come across any data on that.
Is that something that would be relevant to the valuation of this property?
You know, I can only find the data that I can find.
Now, if we take a look at your comparable number 4 again, isn't it true that that's an internal rearranging of corporations, that it's not truly arm's length?
When we did an analysis on this, it looked to be a good sale from our perspective.
Now, you showed the sales verification form on the subject property, and typically sales verification forms are sent out in these matters, yes?
Yeah.
Did you review the sales verification form on that sale?
I didn't see any when it had taken place.
Do you know if there's one been sent out?
Usually for vacant land, there is not sales verification sent out.
You'll agree.
I'm speculating. But
You'll
I'm pretty
agree with
confident
me
of
that there is something unusual about that sale, given the sale, about sale number 4, given the sale of your comparable number 3.
To answer your question, Mr. Boardroom, I've acknowledged that the sale is an outlier, and the value that I've placed on the subject property is significantly lower than the sale of comp number 4.
And in fact, if we look at this, the only sale you have that is actually of vacant land at the time of sale is your comparable number 1, right?
Which is an inferior property, which is 5 years away from the reference date.
On your page 7, it's on Cloutier Drive, adjacent to the river. You think that's inferior?
It's not within the perimeter.
It's within the city of Winnipeg, isn't it?
It is within the city of Winnipeg.
Those are my questions, thank you. I do have some rebuttal evidence.
Thank you. Let's see if the panel has any questions of the assessor. Mr. Bradford.
Your first comparable then on Cloutier Drive.
Yep.
Is that a stretch of the river that has been erosion prone?
Yes, I think what happens if you look at it here, because there is significant erosion issue with regards to the river here right now, I don't think they're affected by it, just by looking at, They may or may not be.
Would they be?
You know what, I'd have to do a better picture of that.
If you're buying this property, how far down the road do you look, and does erosion give you the willies?
Oh, significantly, which is why I took the comparable for the location of it, and which is why it's so much lower than the subject property. There's still increases that take place. Like land values haven't gone within the city of Winnipeg. We know this through our paired analysis studies that we do. And so that's why I'm saying it's significantly inferior to the subject property with regard to the erosion problem and the location.
Okay. And comparable number 4, you're saying is such an outlier and so different than number 3.
Yeah.
You're really not relying on it.
No, I'm just putting that for information. So comparable 2 and 3 are more similar. And when we look at other transactions that have taken place, the $50 to $60 range for this type of property in the Pembina Highway seems reasonable.
Okay.
And I cannot state it like what happened on my page 11 here is I never would have imagined that taking place. That sort of development beside railway tracks. I understand apartments get beside railway tracks all the time, but we would never have considered putting a surplus land component on this property for the use because we never thought it would happen. But as the city of Winnipeg goes through situations where, increasing our population density and encouraging, more dense, residential homes, and there's obviously a demand for it. They built this property here, which never existed, and they're building the one on Pembina and Bison Drive. So,
and the one on the comparable number 2, the Montcalm Hotel site,
yep.
the $2.9 million represents only the real estate, it's not including the going concern value of a hotel?
No, that would be my guess and speculation with regards to it, because it's comparable to what else we've seen here before. And you got to also look at that. That's like 5.5 years away from the reference date.
Okay. All my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Pesh?
Were there other land sale comparables that you excluded from this list? When you
Well,
did your research?
we had some that were north of Bishop Grandin, 1521 Pembina Highway, or right where the Shell station is. There was that vacant parcel of land that's been redeveloped and made into a strip mall. I could have used that, but what happened, and that one was great because for my colleagues who are doing their demonstration report, we do that for our paired sales analysis to come when we're doing the cost approach to value. I didn't choose that because it was a bit further away, but there are sales, and then as we go towards, land sales that are by Confusion Corner, they're even higher.
And you're comparable to, I get the impression you're unsure as to whether it was sold as a going concern or for land. Is that correct?
That is correct, but how I end up looking at this is like in a lot of land sales that end up taking place, because we have a lot of gas stations that take place and a lot of buildings where they've taken, before when there's amalgamation of gas stations, they've taken a lot of those properties and they built them. So they bought that parcel of land, tore them down, and built brand new gas stations. I think of the Charleswood Hotel. I didn't use that here, but we got the Charleswood Hotel that was torn down, and I'm just thinking about it right now, but they built a brand new co-op there. And so what's the cost of building that co-op and the financing for it? Because they took a hotel, it was an old hotel built in the 50s, right? And so...
Was the subject property at the time of sale marketed?
This one here, or the Charleswood Hotel?
No, the subject property that we're considering today.
Oh no, it's not marketed at all because it's being used as a business. But what our perspective is that what is the highest and best use of this property?
Yes.
Even if this property was used, like using $1.50 a square foot or whatever Mr. Bergstrom's using for the unheated space, that's underutilization of the property. That's not the highest and best use.
So as a committee member, am I then to conclude based on that statement that this is a non-arm's length sale?
Which one's this?
Our subject property.
Our subject property?
It wasn't marketed.
Oh, you know what? My guess is that it was not an arm's length sale because the person was there.
Yes.
They purchased the business from the previous owner. So yeah, that is correct.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, I wasn't too sure where you're going with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you do an income approach on this property?
Yes, I did.
But you haven't included it.
I have not.
Okay. That's all my questions. You have some...
I have some rebuttal as well.
Michelle's just...
So I can speak from personal experience. Red River Co-op, meeting about Federated Properties as a client. The Charleswood Hotel at the time of the sale of that property was not an operating business. It had been closed for quite some time. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the assessor's three comparables. Let's start with his comparable number 2 at 2300 Pembina Highway. It was in fact the Montcalm Motor Hotel at the time of sale. Let's take a look at page 4. And this is a sale going back to 2012. So we've shown there some historical pictures of the site. You'll see there the hotel operation. And you'll see there in June of 2012, the Montcalm, you can see cars in the lot. This was a going concern hotel. This was not a vacant land sale. It was not offered on the market. In fact, it was bought with a condition that the zoning be changed. The committee subsequently permitted that. and the sale was finalized and concluded. So this was it's apples and oranges. This is a change of use on this property. So a going concern was purchased, not vacant land. That's reflected in the value, the $2.9 million value that's been reported here. We take a look at the assessor's comparable number 3 at 2525 Common Highway. Curiously, I've done a previous tax appeal on this property. I've inspected it. It's a Dairy Queen, and it was a Dairy Queen operation at the time of sale, leased by the owner to Dairy Queen. And you'll see there on our page 7, you'll note from the assessor's brief that he shows the sale as April 6th of 2016. At page 7 of our brief, and you can see the date in the bottom corner of the picture there from Google Streets. This is a picture from July of 2017. The restaurant is still there, still operational, looking at the vehicles in the parking lot. This is not a vacant land sale. Property was not on the market, and I can tell you that the former owner is a client.
Did I say that it was on the market?
So,
Sorry, I apologize.
it was a sale, an acquisition price of land and buildings, and it included the tenant. There was a lease in place on this property, after which the tenant would have vacated. Now, the fourth piece of information I want to, the next piece of information I want to tell you, and you recall that I asked the assessor quite specifically about the parcel immediately north of the Dairy Queen. And I can tell you from our information, we report the details on page 2. This sale, you see there that that's the little site that I'm talking about on page 2. This was acquired from the city of Winnipeg. The former roll number was 306185100. It is the parcel immediately adjacent to the Dairy Queen. So the assessor shows this site size now as a total of 53,721 square feet. We know that the Dairy Queen sold the 28,715 square feet. That's confirmed by the assessor's information and our records. They acquired an additional 25,016 square feet, which were part of that roll. And that was, they were acquired, they reported closing date of November 11th, 2017. And you'll note in the assessor's brief, he shows December of 16. Our records indicate it was almost a year after that. The reported sale price for that parcel, $550,000. If you do the calculations, it works out to $21.99 per square foot. In each of the cases that the assessor is suggesting should be applied to the subject lands, if it were in fact a desirable location for that type of use, were available to be approached exactly as these cases have, exactly as has happened in these cases. The Palm Hotel, the Dairy Queen restaurant property, any potential investor. You can look at the other projects that the assessor has referred to. Nobody, to my knowledge, has approached the owners of the subject property with the proposal to buy the property, to scrape it, and redevelop it. I do note one of the assessor's development comparables on Pembina Highway wouldn't be allowed today, arising from the Lac-Mégantic tragedy. The rules changed, and development is not allowed in that proximity to rail lines any longer. So today, that would not be allowed. That doesn't apply to the subject property, and it doesn't apply to the development. I don't believe it applies to the development targeting the University of Manitoba students. That was a very particular acquisition price. You'll also, I presume, be aware of appraisal literature. Certainly Mr. Best and Mr. Pereski should be aware of it. indicating the inflated values that can be associated with assemblage and wattage, where there is an acquisition price, particularly where there are existing buildings and leases and tenants in place don't reflect vacant land values. They reflect a premium for those properties. And so for those reasons, it's certainly my suggestion that the assessor's evidence does not support his arguments. I'm happy to answer questions on the rebuttal evidence.
Very good. We'll see if there are any. Mr. Froelich?
Well, I guess first note, in terms of a professional courtesy, so what you're saying here is, well, I want to get the first, I'm looking at the point 3 with regards to sale. You said the site was comprised of lands on sale comparable to. You mean sale comparable 3? So sale comparable 2,
Yes.
is that mine or is that?
Sorry, that should read, yeah, well, so it's, yeah. So it's point number 2, but it's your land sale number 3.
Okay, I just was confused there, okay.
Yeah.
So what you're implying here is that the information that I presented here is not true?
What I'm
So what you're saying is that the sale of the 25,016, which I don't see that here, like, so where's the sale that's taking place? Because I'm, you know, if I would have had knowledge of the sale.
Can you slow down and ask one question at a time?
Okay. How come you didn't inform me about the sale?
It's in my rebuttal evidence.
Yeah, I understand that, but as a professional courtesy.
You know what? You know when I pulled this together? Last night after you left your office.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay, fair enough, because I'm just curious, because, you know, I'm always open to dialogue.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so.
But I've identified the roll number of it, right? So you can certainly verify the sale. And I'm telling you that, and I'm happy to show them the document. I'm not going to give you a copy of it.
Yeah.
If I might just take a moment and show it to you.
Okay.
Once in a while, we get access to pretty good information. So there's the Dairy Queen restaurant, and there's the acquisition of that other parcel there.
Okay, so that's
That's the Dairy Queen.
the Dairy Queen, which is at $67.04.
Land and building.
Yeah, but when the building becomes a tear down, what's the, you know what I mean? It's,
I'm not going to argue.
Okay,
this
yeah, that's fair enough.
information.
okay. And what's this, and this one's here?
It's the
And this
parcel.
is the parcel to the north of it, yeah. Okay.
That's $22 a square foot.
Yeah, I see that. And that was the city of Winnipeg that sold it?
Mhm.
Yeah, it was city.
And an acquisition price.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, appreciate that. So are you implying that,
It's on his back. Sorry.
no, are you implying that, you know, land sales for Pembina Highway are $22 a square foot?
Well, I'm not implying anything. What I'm saying is that the evidence of your sales before us, one was a going concern hotel in operation at the time of sale that was not on the open market for sale. The second one was the Dairy Queen restaurant with a lease in place to a tenant that went past the date of acquisition. Again, subject to the lease, not a vacant land sale. And then we have the other sale north of that, at about from the $22 a square foot. So the evidence would seem to indicate, the evidence, the relevance that I'm providing is indicating that these are, that they are not reliable sales for vacant land. Where you have a change use, the IAAL standards, and I'm happy to provide you with those, with that reference when I get back to the office, but the IAAL standards suggest that where there's a use change, like the hotel, like the Dairy Queen, that those sales ought to be excluded from consideration.
And I've already discussed, you know, with regards to, the IAAO says the same thing about the slate portfolio sale, and you guys provide that as evidence as well, do you not?
I'm not an assessor.
Okay, but you're quoting IAAO legislation though.
If we take the,
You know what?
I'm not gonna
We're
get into
we're not
it.
going to go back, okay.
But
We'll just make it short,
your
yeah.
brief references the IAAO.
Okay.
And so my assumption is that you're acting under their standards.
Okay. My question is, do you believe in interim uses? Like interim use for property where a person may purchase a property, use it for a short period of time with intentions of future development at a later time?
I believe that absolutely happens
Okay.
in the market.
And that would happen in downtown parking lots quite a bit in some circumstances?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Downtown parking lots tend to, by and large, tend to be too small to support a significant development on it.
Yeah, but
And just
Yeah,
to expand
yeah.
on it just a little bit, the value of those lands are going to be directly related to their development potential as other than a parking lot.
so what is your guideline with regards to, because you're claiming that we should not use my sales because they were a business, that they were, like the Montcalm Hotel and the Dairy Queen hotels are actual businesses, but the period of time that they were used as at the time of sale was very short, because the highest and best use for these properties were not the current usages. It's not the Montcalm Hotel here anymore, it's not the Dairy Queen anymore, so that would support the argument that the highest and best use would be based on land, and that the purchase price was based on land.
So I'm not sure I heard a question, but let me try and respond. What the vendor was selling in the case of the Montcalm Hotel, not on the market.
Yep.
What the vendor was selling was a going concern hotel operation, and he got what he thought was an appropriate value for that. So we don't have the same, there's a change in use, and so we don't have the same sort of parameters. We're all aware of acquisition prices in the market. We're all aware of assemblage and wattage prices in the market. That's going to be one example. The Dairy Queen property was also not on the market at the time of sale. And more than that, they needed to not acquire not just that, but the adjacent property. They acquired the adjacent property at a much lower rate.
So,
But again, it's
as an ongoing concern, did the buyer purchase that to run it as a hotel, or did the buyer purchase it to know that he wanted to redevelop condos?
They purchased it with the intent, I believe, to buy condos. But one of the very first adjustments that you've got to make in a direct comparison approach is motivation of purchaser.
But it's hard to quantify that sometimes. And I asked you the question, do you have any comparables? No other questions?
It might be hard to quantify, it's still required.
Okay, we'll see if the panel has any questions. Mr. Beretsky? Questions?
So the Montcalm Motor Hotel sale had 2.9, I'm asking him now.
Yes, this is rebuttal. Asking questions on the
The
rebuttal.
Montcalm Motor Hotel sale at $2.9 million was a land and building sale.
Going concern sale.
No, I'm asking you, was it a land and building sale?
So with hotels, we need to be very cautious about.
Okay, I'm
No,
going to
Okay.
re-question you
Okay.
in order to make sure that I'm getting at an answer that I'm seeking.
Okay.
It was a land and building sale.
No.
It was not a land.
It
What
was-
part
it
was
was
not
the-
included?
it was-
No. What was not included? Land not included or hotel building not included?
Business. With
I didn't
hotels-
ask about the business.
Okay, so let me just explain.
Was land included?
So if I might just explain about hotels for a moment.
Mr.
I
Chairman,
don't
please,
think-
I don't need an explanation.
Yeah,
of
we don't need the
hotels.
explanation of hotels. You've told us already about that.
Okay.
The question is,
Okay,
was the building on the land when it sold?
The building was on the land when it sold.
Okay, thank you.
Again,
That's-
So the
the-
registered sale price at $2.9 million, are you telling me that was the value of the land, the building, and the business interest? The business as an operating concern, the right to the franchise, if there was a franchise, the clients, all that sort of thing, operating as a hotel. That is what the buyer purchased.
So
business
may
and
I
the-
now answer?
Yes.
Okay. So hotel sales are interesting as they're reported because the amount registered in land titles office is always very different. There are many, and I'm not positive about this one. But the going concern sale, let me talk about the McLaren for one moment. $1.2 million in 2003. Reported land titles registration price of about $800,000 in 2003. Now, the municipal board decided on a value less than $500,000 land and building. But there is always a competing interest between the purchaser and the vendor because the purchaser cannot write off goodwill, but they can, or the land, but they can depreciate the building. The vendor doesn't want to recapture the building, so there's always competing interest, and the sale price that goes through land titles office for these types of transactions is always inevitably some kind of a compromise between the accountants and lawyers. It never represents the full price.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. You're saying the 2.9 was the realty value plus something else?
Allocated realty value.
Yes.
Yes.
Of course. Okay.
Yes.
All right. And then the Dairy Queen sale in 2016 at $1.9 million, you're saying that the corner lot then was purchased from the city for $550?
$22 a square foot.
Okay. So what we're looking at is then combined somewhere between the $67 a square foot and the 22 for the two of them combined.
Again, you need then to adjust for the motivations of the purchaser to acquire the Montcalm site and the Dairy Queen site, neither of which were on the market for sale. So when you adjust for more, and Mr. Frolick hasn't gone through the exercise, I certainly haven't, but that's one of the required adjustments as you go through. And I haven't introduced it here, but as you go through the appraisal of real estate, third Canadian edition, under the direct comparison approach, one of the mandatory adjustments that you're going to make, aside for property rates conveyed, is going to be motivation of purchaser. And it's my suggestion that once you do that in this case, you're going to come up with an indication of the true land sale price, far less than what Mr. Fuller is reporting.
And we'll see that in your evidence.
No, I haven't included in mine. But
No. I mean, you will account for that in your evaluation.
I'm not using the land value.
All right.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, my approach, just to get ahead of myself, my approach is the same approach applied, that the city applied in 2018 and that we applied in 2018.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Pesh, any questions?
So your rebuttal evidence, page 2, point number 3, where you highlight the corner lot being sold for $550,000 from the city.
Yes.
What was the mechanism of that sale?
As with all city sales, it would have had to have gone to committee. The planning and property planning department would have had to have designated the lands as surplus and not needed, and they would have agreed on a sale price.
Based on your experience, what is the cost of demolition per square foot?
It depends on the property. It really does. And so you'll find that under section 66 of the Marshall and Swift cost manual. It's going to, there's a range in there. It depends on the class of property being demolished, and it depends on whether there's any remediation required in that demolition. I'm not suggesting that that would be the case in the Montcalm or the Dairy Queen, but for example, in structures where there is asbestos. There's a building near collapse on Princess. It was just recently reported. That vintage, I'm pretty sure, is going to have.
Are you able to offer that range of demolition?
I can. So for, I gotta think about this for a moment.
Well,
Class C masonry.
You're not
would
presenting the land
No,
the land
no.
sale, so maybe
No.
it isn't
Okay.
Is it really relative what
Yeah,
the,
thanks.
your
Because
cost?
the curiosity was raised in a rebuttal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Questions?
Per square foot is not monstrous.
Okay, thank you.
I have no questions, so we will continue with your evidence, please.
You?
Sorry, Carrie.
No, I'm just making sure we're okay.
Yes.
That's no, I know the spot. So the first thing I'm going to do is take you to page 17 of our brief. I can tell you that I haven't shown you the board order here, but I can tell you that this is the commercial summary from the City of Winnipeg Assessment Department for the subject property for the 2018 Realty Assessment. I'm looking at pages 17 and 18. I can tell you that I appeared before this board in respect of an appeal of the 2018 Realty Assessment, and that both the city and I provided an income approach on the property. I don't care what the board did with the decision, but in both cases, both the city and we applied an income approach. Now, they're absolutely entitled to change their approach. It's our submission that their report, their approach as it's been submitted here today, isn't reliable. So applying the same approach as we did previously, let me just give you a little background of this property. So page 2 is a view of the property from the street, Pembina Highway. If you've ever been to this location, it's Copel's Water. I've attended it, not for inspection purposes, but I've attended it to buy the product.
Water.
Yes. The building that you see on the left-hand side, or the portion of the structure you see on the left-hand side, you'll see a loading door. That's where they take in the water in and out. That's what we'll term the retail component of it. It's not a high level of finish. There is some nominal office space in there as well. It's not what I would define as a high-end retail development in that structure. Part of the balance of the property is heated, and part of it is not. And you'll see there the portion on the left-hand side of the picture, that's the part of the warehouse component of this property. That's not heated. So we go through the details of the building on page 3. It's actually constructed in 3 separate components, and you can actually get a look at those 3 separate components on page 4. And so you have the original masonry wall structure, 1973 with 12-foot wall height. That's the sort of the retail portion at the front. They have a lot of water in there as well, like the 5-gallon jugs. There was a 1988 edition with 16-foot wall height, and then there was the 2004 edition with 19-foot wall height. That's the unheated space. So you have 9,500 square feet of unheated space. So as we did previously, and as the city did previously, we broke it down into the 2 separate income streams, one retail, one industrial. We show a number of rental comparables. I have provided the assessor with the addresses of these rental comparables. Let me just reach over here so I have access to them. So in terms of retail locations, these 3 of them, the first 4 are on Pembina Highway, and the other 2 are located on Markham Road, which is in close proximity to the subject of Waverly Heights. The third one is actually Flatlanders, which is a carpet outlet. So they have some retailing in this location. That's just in the Sterling Lion area on the east side of Waverly. My apologies, Route 90. Based on those rental comparables, all of which in my mind are superior to the subject retail development. We've applied based on all of that $12 a square foot, $6 for a vacancy rate, which is the standard retail vacancy rate used by the city in the 2020 assessment. Similarly, $6.50 shortfall, 7% non-recovered. The capitalization rate, we have provided a separately filed retail capitalization rate study. I don't intend to go over it other than to say that it was developed in the same manner as was the industrial cap rate study. I did not prepare the retail cap rate study. It was another individual in our office. But based on that, we think that 7.25% should be applied to the retail income stream. We then took a look at the industrial or the light manufacturing component. We show again a number of rental comparables. You'll note on page 9 that the first 7 are shown, but that numbers 8 and 9 have an asterisk beside the address. That's because those are unheated spaces. Those are arm's length leases from an investor in an investment property rented. They rent unheated space in a separate building on that site. The rents that we show there at $1.48 and $3 per square foot are gross rents. So when you net them down, you're getting awful close to zero. So based on those rental comparables, we've applied $7 per square foot to the heated industrial area within this property. $2.50 per square foot to unheated space. That's a figure that has been applied during this cycle for other unheated spaces. And so we go then to the unheated. That's the next table. So on page 10, we show the breakdown of how we arrive at the potential gross income, the heated space, the unheated space, the net market rents that have been applied to those. Vacancy, also in this location, 4%, 375 shortfall, which is the department's shortfall rate in assessment, 7% unrecovered expenses, and for the industrial component, given the unheated space, $7.75 a square foot is the rate that we've applied to that space. Mathematics are shown on page 11, and we're looking for a reduction to $1,406,000. Which interestingly works out to $22.28 a square foot, which is a little bit higher than the sale price of that corner lot that the assessor referred to. So I'm going to suggest that that value is a much stronger indicator of what this property was worth in 2020. The only comments I'm going to add...
Sorry, is it 22 what?
Sorry, what?
$22.
$22.28 per square foot at $1,406,000. The only other thing I'm going to add, aside from the demolition costs of this property, nobody has approached them to develop it. Those types of developments are few and far between. This property, the location that the assessor showed at the corner of Bison Drive and Pembina Highway, and one further up at Markham and Pembina Highway, both the one developed with condos, those were rented out to students. The development that's going on at Bison Drive and Pembina Highway are, I don't want to call them pocket suites because those are really small, but they are all very small apartment size, targeted very specifically at university and Manitoba students. This location is further down, not nearly, it's further down from Bison Drive. You don't have the same kind of access. It's a bit of a long walk. The property on the old Dairy Queen and Corner site has certainly better bus access. And so, on balance, we think that $1,406,000 is well supported by the evidence. And with that, I'm open to questions.
Okay, thank you. We'll see if there are any questions.
Yes,
Mr.
so
Cronin?
the sale that you referenced of the $22 a square foot, was that listed in the marketplace?
I don't believe it was. I believe pursuing a development in that location, that would have happened almost simultaneously when they acquired or made the offer on the Dairy Queen. They would have been in conversations with the property and planning department prior to that, certainly the local city councilor. Sales of city-owned properties, and I've looked at a number of them. There's a process to go through.
Yeah.
First of all, it has to be deemed excess,
Yeah.
surplus,
Yeah.
not needed for cities. They go through the financial implications, and then they agree on the sale price.
So you don't have any documentation showing that the city of Winnipeg was actively marketing this parcel of land for $22 a square foot?
You know, I haven't searched the City of Winnipeg website. I do know that the city has extensively advertised a number of vacant land sites as surplus property.
But you don't know if
I
this
don't
one was...
know about this one.
Would there be other, because to me that sales price seems a bit low than market evidence.
It's what's reported, right?
Yeah, and I understand that, but let me finish here. Would there be any sort of other motivation by the city of Winnipeg to sell it at a below market value for it, knowing that there would be, the net benefit to the city would be significantly higher with a large 15 complex multifamily unit there?
I think that the city politically might have some distress if it came out that they were selling properties at lower than market.
But in terms of short-term and long-term, I'm just speculating. Okay.
But this is
Okay.
not in his evidence.
Yep.
He's
Well-
deal with his brief.
No problem. Is this property being utilized as its highest and best use
Currently,
currently?
its highest and best use in my mind exceeds land value less demolition costs, so yes.
Okay. And so in your comparables on page 8, you only have 2 comparables. One's at $7.50, which is like an industrial-like area on Lawson Road, and one at $12. Yet all your other comparables are significantly higher than the $12, yet you chose $12. Why is that?
When you look at the type of industrial space here, I thought $12 per square foot was actually
But the retail portion
a pretty
is not,
generous allocation.
the retail portion is not different than, it's not industrial, it's the retail portion. Yeah.
So I've been in there, and
Yeah.
I can tell you that this is not a high-level retail finish.
Yeah, and I understand that. I'm just curious because your evidence shows differently than,
And I'm telling you that this space is inferior to those rental comparables.
in fairness of time, no other questions.
Thank you. Mr. Pesh, any questions?
None at this time, thank you.
Mr. Bretsky?
You had referred to the lack of gigantic setback requirements, for want of a better
There's still,
term,
yeah.
and that the spot would not be built currently.
I don't believe it would be permitted to be constructed there.
So if we take a look at the photo on page 4, at the top, the railway right-of-way, what is that setback requirement now, and how much of this lot would be impinged by that setback?
So for the subject property?
Yeah.
I don't believe it would be impacted, and I think I mentioned that, I don't believe it would be impacting on the subject property.
Okay.
But the one development, like the high demand, the development of the lands behind, would not, in the assessor's evidence, that would not be permitted today. He showed the commercial in the front and the one behind.
Would not be permitted because of a required setback
I
from
believe that's
the...
correct, yeah.
Okay,
From
but
the
if the
rest.
setback is required there, why is a setback not required on the subject?
I believe that that the development on the site or the structure could be configured to comply with those requirements. I don't have them in front of me, and I'm going by a couple of discussions I had in the office. But I don't believe that it impacts the subject.
Sorry, I'm just not
Yeah,
understanding.
I believe that the development, and I don't want to go back to the assessor's evidence, but they're pretty clear that the multifamily construction that happened there is at the rear of the site. The configuration on the subject site, as it is on the corner lot, towards the Pembina side of the site, I believe that you're going to be allowed to park vehicles at the rear. If you're not going to be,
Oh, okay.
you're not going to be allowed to construct a building, so it's going to impact on your configuration of the site.
So you're saying that it's conceivable that there could be a building on the subject site at the street side of the lot with parking behind and therefore not conflict with those new requirements?
Yeah, that's possible. And as you look, you've obviously not looked, but as you look at the picture on page 3, and then you can see a little bit on page 4. This strip, you don't see people coming in along this strip buying up the properties for multi-res development. There's, at this point in time at least, and certainly as of the reference date, there's no indication that I've seen that there is such a demand for that kind of development. You've got the very student-targeted development north of there, and a lot of the multi-res that Mr. Froelich has referred to earlier is also occupied by students because of their close proximity to public transportation and the University of Manitoba.
The major intersection just to the south of it, is that Dalhousie? Am I reading that?
Yeah, that's correct.
On here? Okay. Okay, that's all my questions.
Thank you. What do they do in the 9,000 and some square feet that is unheated?
You know, I haven't inspected in there.
It seems like a lot of, I mean, Mr. Froelich had said something about parking a truck in there or something.
Yeah. To be fully honest, I haven't inspected inside there, but you got to think, and certainly I believe, that if it required heat, it would have heated.
But they couldn't be storing water in there this time of year.
I don't believe that's the case. I believe that all the production is in the middle industrial park.
Seems like kind of a big space for parking of a few trucks or something, 9,000.
9,500 square feet is not that big.
But how much water do they produce there in over 6,000 square feet? Like, it just, something was fishy with regard, because I wanted to inspect it, but we have no time, right?
Anyway, that was all my questions about the unheated space, and you talked about the heated space and it being slightly less than average retail space.
For the retail space, yes.
Okay, if anybody would like, Mr. Froelich, if you'd
No,
like
I'm
to anything to add?
Haven't you heard enough from me yet?
Yeah.
I have to say that I'm told that this room is wanted at 1 o'clock.
Yes,
Oh,
we
my
just
goodness.
have time to go through the recs.
Okay. Can I just quickly do the washing, please?
Yes.
Sorry, I drank much water.
Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order, and we'll deal with the properties that we think there's some...
Are there some?
Yeah. That's funny.
I had to confirm that after this morning. I have a bad sense of humor.
Sorry.
Mr. Froelich, maybe
Yeah.
you could tell us which one you'd like
Yeah,
to deal
for sure. We're
with.
going to deal with 835 Mission.
835 Mission?
Yeah.
1 second, please.
So file number is 193822. Roll number is 06-05-069-4200. The assessed value is $5,891,000. I had initially made a recommendation on here, but I like to, Mr. Brookshire had a conversation last night looking at a variety of factors, and we mutually agreed upon a value of $5,291,000.
$5,291,000.
Yep.
And Mr. Borkstrom, was
Well,
that?
coincidentally, that's the number we were seeking, and I often find it difficult to argue against my own number.
There's no need to argue against your own.
There is not.
Okay. Very good. That will take care of 835 Mission Street.
Next one we're looking at would be 67 Archibald.
67 57 Archibald.
File number is 193796. Roll number is 060929 23500. The initial value was $1,612,000. And I'd like to make a recommendation to $1,470,000.
$1,470,000.
Yeah, and then 1, 2, 3,
And the
5. Yeah. And I actually have workups here. If you wanted them.
Is that, Mr. Boardroom, is that satisfactory?
I
to you?
have not had the opportunity to discuss it with my client, but we are not opposing the recommendation, nor will I make submission on this file.
Very good.
Do you want these, Mr. Chairman?
I would.
Yes, please.
Okay. Brad, I'm keeping yours because I just want to keep with the file.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions of the panel?
Just the change between
Essentially market rent.
the rent.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, that was 67 Archibald. Mr. Froelich, was
Yep,
there?
I just
Oh,
want to get my next property going.
yeah,
Can I go?
yes, please.
Okay. File number is 19.
Which property is
Oh,
it?
I apologize. 1201 Regent.
1201 Regent, so 1 second, please. Just get some input.
File number is 193754. And I'll slow. Sorry about that.
Let me just approach it for a moment. Carry on. I'm just going to let me check something. So there's a CC on this one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And I'm going to provide it to the panel members so they can see it.
But not me? I'm kidding.
No, I got a copy for you. Because I knew last night I forgot to
Yeah.
make 6 copies for one of them.
It's all good.
So, but I'm pretty sure I got 6 here. I got 6 here. Okay. Continuing on with the roll number for
Yes.
1201 Regent. Roll number is 00901-039-4400. That's 1201 Regent. There's 2 aspects of this property. And, yeah, okay, I was confused here as well. So there's a residential component of it, which is $56,000 at classification 10, R1. And then there is the second portion, originally, which was $18,675,000, which was taxable 10. So doing the math here, and I do have copies to share, because there's 2 income streams for this property. This is a rough draft of it, but just to make it work out. So the significant reduction will end up taking place on the manufacturing side of it, where we adjusted the market rent. And so that aspect of the value completely is 14094 plus 99. So for the 60T portion of it, the recommended value is $14,193,000 plus the 56 plus the 56K fix is $14,249,000. But the breakdown is the 10T is $56,000 and the 60T is $14,193,000.
That's different, a different number than what you have on the sheet you just handed out?
Well, no, because what happens here is you got to add. So what I did is 14094 plus 99,000. That equals 1,4,193 plus 56,000.
Where does the 99,000?
The 99, there's some additional buildings on here.
Okay,
that you don't see.
okay.
And then if you add that with the 56,000, that's where you get the 114,249,000.
14,249,000. And then to the 14,249,000 is added the 56,000? Oh, no.
No, that's separate, that's a separate, that one has to be 10T, so there's no changes to that aspect of the property.
And that's
Brad,
a
you had some
different-
questions? You look,
That's a different
No,
number.
I'm just trying to,
okay. Pardon
That's
me?
a different number than what you have on your brief on page 1. You've got 15,248,000.
Yeah, well, Brad and I had some discussions last night.
over smaller number.
Our Kumbaya moment.
Are you accepting this recommendation?
Yeah, actually, I had just received confirmation from my client, and we're good with that. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. That was 1201. Okay. And the rest, apparently, we were going to adjourn for another day. 3 properties left.
51 Vermac, 26 Hemlow, and 901 Regent.
Okay, you notice letter sent out.
Eventually. Well, we had another one we convened on. So I don't think it's been added to a document.
And maybe they can be added to that.
Maybe she's collecting them all together. And
Probably it'll be in the evening.
perfect, I love
Me
those.
too.
Will you be there?
Oh, more than likely. Okay, report off.
Okay. And that will adjourn the meeting.